moment. It's a pause. It's like the world is on a, on your DV. It's a pause button. And I think we have at this very moment, we could speak about all kinds of spiritual stuff, which I'm into as well. But I think it is that moment where it's like when a 9/11 happened. It was a moment of pause, of clarity, of a silence. It's like, so when will humanity stop its frenetic motion of commerce, of trade, of working for money, and reflect just for a brief second? There's an opening of conscience, right? That the soul is fully now aware of who we are, and I hope that's that moment. I mean, of course, it could go the other way where we just dissolve into chaos, and I think the most dangerous thing is not the virus. I think it's fear. But what Friend said, fear is an acronym, false evidence appearing real. So I think we have to be very calm and committed to unconditional love of our neighbors at this time. And we will, I think, also see the revelation that the system of money is an illusion, that suddenly money will appear out of nowhere to save us all, right? It's a remarkable that you think about 1 month of an economic heart attack and the world is in this death spiral, right? Economically. And that reveals to me everything, that the whole thing was a bit of a constructed, a construction of our imagination, money itself. Something that I've talked a lot about with Evo and others, right? So it gives us pause to reimagine. We have to redream an economy based, I think, on love. I mean, it sounds really out there, but I'm compelled by it. I think it's possible. I know it's possible. We've even worked it out on spreadsheets. It's not like we can't say it's not possible. But the question is, what will we do now, at this moment? And each one of us has an opportunity to act in congruence with the love that we were created to be. So that's why we have to be very, I think, conscious is awareness, right? So our awareness is suddenly opened to our vulnerability, but also to the importance of relationships and trust and belonging. Those are the hallmarks of what I call an economy well-being. So,
yeah, you wrote a book about all these concepts. You wrote 2 books actually.
2 books, yeah. And I have a third book. My third book, my publisher doesn't want to publish yet. It's called Money Grows on Trees. What did I learn as a 7-year-old about money that I've, now that I'm about to be 60, can reflect on and say, my father would always tease me. He says, what do you think, son? Money grows on trees. And I discovered, actually, it's true. It does grow on trees, and so that's the third book. But maybe I'll just self-publish that or podcast it in a series of podcasts.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that. So here we are, 2 economists. And I have the feeling that we will not speaking about economics.
No, we won't. No, actually, but economics, is Manfred an economist as well?
No, I don't believe so. Maybe he has a background in.
You have an economics background.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh, well, fantastic. Then we could talk about the original Greek notion of economy.
Yes.
Because there's some wisdom, right, in those in the things that we weren't taught, right, about economics, which I find that's what I've learned in my discovery. My path is like you look at the word economy and it means household stewardship, right? And you look at happiness means well-being of your spirit or your soul. So it's like these are actually very wise, compelling notions that I think we've gotten away from.
Yeah, I believe so that we did, and it might be so that this crisis is a new opening for us to remember all that, to reintegrate that into a modern day way of doing, of going about. So that's what I really want to speak to you about today, and dedicate some time to talk and be in dialogue about the hopeful timeline. So the fear timeline is very evident. It's very clear. It's very real. Also, you also mentioned just now the world could be in chaos. And then there's also the opportunity dimension of this crisis. I mentioned earlier in the earlier interview, the Chinese symbol is inspiring in this sense to have
Right.
both threat and opportunity
Yeah,
in it.
I love that symbol. Yeah. Having worked
Yeah,
with the Chinese, there's great wisdom in the Chinese view of the world. Yeah. Yeah.
it seems to me quite complete. And I think that a few of us forward thinkers, seers, doers are the dots. And now it's also time to connect those dots into a timeline of hope that people can maybe focus on.
That's right. I just noticed my mic wasn't actually on. It was unplugged for a minute. Now it's going to get even better. I'm just kidding.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, let's
This is
talk
time
about it.
to
We're
conversation.
two
Yeah,
economists. You're a coach as well, leadership coach, and
I
yeah.
am.
So I've delved into that, helping others who are coaching and saying, what do we have to learn? I'm a macroeconomist, so like I don't have any advice to give per se, legitimately, right, to individuals.
Mhm.
But yeah, so let's get into this. Where do you want to go with?
Well, I hope to envision with you what a hopeful timeline would lead us to. So, what would a hopeful future look like?
Uh, well, I've written about that in my The Economy Well-being, my second book,
Hmm.
and people said, well, as if the first book, The Economics of Happiness, wasn't enough. And I wrote that first book in 2007. People said I predicted the crash of 2008. I said I did not. I just know that the money system, is inherently vulnerable. Why? Because it's based on debt money. Uh, and we use a euphemism credit, but actually debt is kind of the enslavement of humanity. And until we wake up to this truth, and we have to go back to ancient Sumeria to discover that these ancient cultures had very clear laws on debt forgiveness. They called them the clean slate laws, which the Jews adopted, called the Jubilee laws. And I said, but not since Roman times have we practiced this wise economics. And why was that important? Because every 7 years they forgive debts in Sumeria. That would have created a refreshing, a reboot of the economic system.
Hmm.
We see since World War II now that U.S. debt has been doubling roughly every 7 years. Okay,
Yeah.
and so we're stuck. We are, and it's like the coronavirus. It's parabolic, the debt curve.
Yeah.
And the question right now is, can we reimagine a system in which money is no longer created as debt, but is becomes a kind of utility. We become each other's bankers in the sense we're going to create money in whatever amounts we need to do what, to not necessarily guaranteed income, but let's call it a well-being for all lifestyle.
Hmm.
What does that look like? That means that every one of us has the opportunity to fulfill our calling, our vocation, wherever here on the planet. Not just to go to school to get educated, and the word education in Latin educare means to draw forth what's already within you.
Hmm.
That's the truth of that word. But to actually pursue our spiritual, mental, physical, emotional well-being, which is the idea of the medicine wheel that indigenous people of Turtle Island, also called North America, have
Hmm.
long understood. 10,000 years of that understanding. And so we have an opportunity to return, excuse me, to those ancient traditions. Indigenous people never had money as such. They used seashells, cowrie shells, wampum. They had potlatch ceremonies, which were over-gifting ceremonies. You would have a potlatch every 5 years. Your family would host everybody in
Hmm.
Utrecht or whatever, and we'd have a fantastic feast. But there were so many people in Utrecht, you'd never have to repeat that ceremony, would you,
Yeah.
in your
Hmm.
lifetime? So these are the kind of models that that existed. And I think we have an opportunity to, um, the Cree nation, the Cree people say every child born is an answer to a prayer.
Hmm.
So what we're talking about is redreaming the world economy.
Yeah.
Uh, and because we're such creative creatures, we could create with all of our, forget artificial intelligence, with all of our human
Hmm.
capacities.
Hmm.
Can we not think about a system in which banks and become the facilitators of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
That money is never scarce ever again. It should never have been scarce in the first place. And
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing that revealed now. Watch what
Mm-hmm.
happens. The
Mm-hmm.
helicopter money will magically appear, right? Hopefully.
So that's
Or,
your prediction?
what's that?
Is that your prediction?
Of course, it's already happening. They're already
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, now is the time for guaranteed income," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, no, that's a potential trap too,
Mm.
because I'm talking about releasing, opening up the powers of money creation to all of us. We are
Yeah.
all each other's keeper in a sense. Could we imagine a system in which we collectively, whether it's in Holland or Canada, we say this is how much liquidity we need for our economy to flourish, for everybody to flourish, for nature to be resilient, for the carbon footprint to go down, to stop trading and moving stuff around the planet for the sake of money changing hands, so a very few people can accumulate more money wealth while the rest of us work for money, trading our life energy. So my imagination is every child born, every person born right now in Holland or Canada has about 700,000 hours of life energy to live.
Mm-hmm.
1 hour is the same value for everybody in my mind. What if we could, and Steph Coopers and I have talked about this, and he's from Antwerp, because he's created a model called sustainable money.
Mm-hmm.
And we've spoken about this a couple times now in my
Mm-hmm.
podcast, is we could play this scenario out in a spreadsheet, in a game,
Yeah.
so that we can't say this isn't possible. And where will it be exercised first and foremost? I think it has to start in The Hague, in London. Why? Because that's the origins of banking.
Mm.
If you think about, in 1649, William of Orange from Holland,
Mm.
the King of England, established the Bank of England. Uh, what does that mean? Why is that important? Because all roads lead to London and therefore to Amsterdam, to now establish a new dream in which money is no longer the master, but we are collectively going to co-create the money system that we need so everyone flourishes.
Who's
There's
we?
all of us, all of humanity. Now, is a complex system I'm talking about? Absolutely. Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
fascinating that with a click of a button, we would all be voting maybe every quarter as to how much money supply we need Canada to have right now, right? We've
Yeah.
got people suffering mental illness, whatever. We need liquidity. Um, it's interesting, the words that we use for money come from nature: liquidity, currency,
Mm-hmm.
banks, right? They're all water metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
So I often jokes like, water can't, if you store up water behind a dam, what happens to it? It putrefies.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore money must be like water. It must flow along the banks to have true liquidity, true currency. Could we model nature? Could nature be the model of our economy? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The nature teaches resilience. Um, it always moves to a point of homeostasis, even in a time of crisis, even when a big fire rips through a forest.
Mm-hmm.
What do you get 2 years later? Explosion of life, right?
Yep.
So these viruses, and Rudolf Steiner said it, viruses are an expression of a toxicity of the cell. Wow, wait a minute. Is the world economy expressing, are we as human beings rejecting this money system, expressing through a virus the toxicity that we all experience, the pain in our souls, that we know there's something wrong, there's something unjust? And so, okay, some of us will die. Some of us will feel pain and anxiety and fear. But now is the time, right? Now is the time
Mm-hmm.
to reimagine. And I'm not just talking just pie in the sky. Again, we've played this out in spreadsheets. I played it out for Canada. It's all possible. We literally have to decide whenever this crisis ends that we're going to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
But will we? That's the question. Or will the powers to be that have, the less than 1%ers, who are the money power,
Yeah.
will relinquish their, I would call it, their sociopathic, right,
Mm-hmm.
lust for more,
Mm.
which is a greed thing. So this is the big challenge. Will those who control the systems now who have all the power, relinquish that and free us all from the slavery of debt money and the slavery of greed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a big question. And it's also a question that's outside of ourselves. So you and me, what would be we be able to do today to work towards nature as a model for our economic system, for example?
Well, I think we're living out that reality right now with our neighbors. I mean, we're self-isolating. It's remarkable, right? It's like our daughters say, like, has this ever happened? This is no, it's never happened. Not in my lifetime. Not my father, who was 85, who lived through the war, right, in Germany. Never happened. Not this kind of global pause. So I think individually we can model this, what we might call a reciprocal economy of sharing, right? And realize that we will have, it's weird that everyone's stored up toilet paper. I don't get that. But anyways, maybe because I'm a man, it's like, but it's like, that I saw a little video where the guy's going to get his Starbucks coffee and he's paying in pieces of toilet paper. And he says, can you give me an extra one just for my wife? And he puts it, it's like, this is how ridiculous it is. Wait a minute. Trees are abundant. There's not going to be a scarcity of toilet paper. But maybe toilet paper becomes a currency. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, from an individual level, I said, I know that we are okay. Like, as a business person, I've always had this idea that I have to have enough money made for a year of no income at all, because I'm a consultant. I don't know if I'm ever going to get another project.
Yeah.
I assume I will, but guess what? My life has been a life of complete dependency on grace. The phone rings just when it's supposed to. And I'm sure you have the same thing. Who would call a coach to give them advice? I don't know. Obviously, lots of people. But, so I think it's fascinating those who, and my wife and I both worked at home ever since our daughters were small. They don't even know what it means for mom and dad to get in the car or public transit to go to work at 7 in the morning. We get up, we make a coffee, we have breakfast, we walk the dog. We have some clients, and, we put in, at best I probably put in 3 or 4 hours of real productive work a day. And we have no debt. And so we're outliers. We know we're outliers, but here's a cool thing. I can coach people how to live this way, how to get out of debt. Because when you're free of debt, you're free. Like, you're literally free of the matrix. And so these are things that we can, I think, explore even in this moment of like, wow, like, because notice in 1 month's time, a lot of businesses are failing. Just 1 month. That means they didn't have enough in reserve, right?
Yeah.
Or they were not willing to share that reserve with their employees, and that somewhat makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But again, because I'm a macroeconomist, I like to think this very high level. How much will we need right now to get people through? Yeah. I estimated that in the U.S., the amount of money sitting on the sidelines right now, that they call it the loss in the stock market. But what is it actually? People sold those stocks. So it went from a $30 trillion valuation, the market cap, before the crash, before this, to $6 trillion now loss off the table. Where's it sitting? It's not a loss, actually. It's sitting in cash. It's sitting in something. And how much would we require to pay every American 6 weeks of their wages, of the average household income? $900 billion, one time. So could we kind of convince these people who are sitting on 6 trillion to distribute some of that to the average households in America who need to get by because right, they have no sick leave, they have no parental leave for their kids.
Yeah.
This would be an act of economic justice. Those are things I imagine. But people say, no, it's crazy. It's never going to happen. I said, why not? Why not at least pose the question and say, where is that money sitting right now?
Well, and it provides an opportunity for us to ponder upon, or maybe even take action upon, is that the redistribution is a possibility now. It's a really real possibility. And I think
it's
that's
a real
really
possibility. And the other thing I say is, the other thing that's a real possibility, as I'm arguing and showing, is that once this is over, we really need to stop and have a conversation about how does the money get created in the first place? Like, how does the sausage get made? Because people are completely naive about that. When I tell them that 98% of the money is created by banks when they issue loans, they're like, what? That means the banks have a monopoly on the creation of money, not the central bank. Central bank plays a role. But so what does this mean then in terms of what we will do on Monday differently than we've done in the last 50 years? Is could we not then imagine that we create money, the banks still play a role, but we're creating money in relationship to our needs and our gifts, our time, right? So now time is the only medium of exchange and the only basis of value. And I've called this model soul printing. So soul printing being each one of us, I just said each one of us has, say, 700,000 hours of life to live. If we live to a statistical life age of 82 years, and that means in my wallet, when I'm born, when your daughter's born or whatever, you have 700,000 hours of credit of real time. A third of that you'll probably sleep, but the other, what happens to the other hours? How do you exchange them to help each other in this world of helping each other's souls develop? Or, in the truest sense of that word. That is an interesting platform, and I've played it out as a digital cryptocurrency idea. Okay. Am I getting attention? Not yet. People are like, oh, that's really cute, but no one's going to play that game. I said, why not? Like, how could this platform work? Because right now, money's magically created in, banks create loans. The thing is just completely spirals, goes exponential, right? Because it's all debt, and the debt can't be repaid ever in its entirety. So we're stuck, right? We're stuck. So we have to think about a system in which money is always being created in relationship to life energy. Right? Every child born.
I'd like to get back to that idea of creation of money in alignment with our needs, our gifts, and our time. This is, for me, one of the perspectives, maybe one of the biggest perspectives that we have, that we can take action upon now already, because the situation in the world provides us the space and the time, but maybe even the time, the time for reflection. It comes naturally for us to give from our talents, to give from our time, to see to each other's needs.
Right. Absolutely. And I think what's exciting about having these conversations, and hopefully we have a big listening audience, but I'm not guaranteed it's going to make the big media, because it probably won't. But imagine if 1 million people were listening to this conversation right now. It will raise consciousness and awareness that something new is possible. I don't care if you're in Jakarta, Singapore, Beijing, Rotterdam, right? Because people need to wake up to that we are the masters of this system. We can redream it and reimagine it. And the fact, if we don't have the conversation now, if we don't put it into the consciousness and awareness of people, the window will close again. Because what will happen the cynical side of me says, oh, wait a minute, this is a consolidation game. That there's that theory that don't miss the opportunity of any crisis, because a crisis is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Okay, what's the desired synthesis in a crisis? Don't know. It could be that the big boys, and they're mostly men, I would say, are simply looking for an opportunity to consolidate. They will call upon a digital, global, integrated system, right, where there's no need for U.S. dollars anymore. You don't want to touch cash because it could contain the virus, right? That's already happening. So there's that kind of cynical side going, if you're playing chess here, we're playing for humanity's soul here. So let's think about, watch what happens. See if that starts to get presented as a thought. as an argument. And we
Yeah.
have to say, no, that is not the conversation we should be having right now. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And maybe there's only 100 of these men,
Mm-hmm.
if that, who are like calling the shots. I'm like, no, that's not acceptable. There's 7 billion of us,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
so
that's what matters, isn't it?
it's that's
That.
but the challenge is how do you create, the space for 7 billion souls to go wake up and realize that we're each other's keepers. Like, we're not stuck in a matrix that is not our construction, or we're complicit in it because we're ignorant, maybe. Uh, but once we're aware, as Henry Ford said, if people were aware how money was created, there would be a revolution tomorrow. He said that, Henry Ford.
Yeah.
I said, there's no revolution happening in America.
You don't think so?
No, they're all asleep.
All of them. Do we all need to be awake?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
or is it necessary for a critical mass to be awake in order for a greater mass to be able to follow?
No, I think one person awake uh, is sufficient to get going.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're awake. Evo's awake.
Mm-hmm.
Falco's awake. Falkenberg, hopefully. I think Falco's awake. Who's Falco Valkenberg? He's an influential person on the European Pension Fund, right? He's an actuarial. He's awake.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Satish Kumar is awake. I mean, there's lots of people who are awake. And the truth, this is the truth, is one person awake, exercising their spiritual gifts, can change the world. Mother Teresa changed Calcutta.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because she was a high consciousness person.
Mm-hmm.
She lived a life of unconditional love. That's what this will take. A strategy of raising individual and collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that? By trying to stay in love, right? By not getting sucked into the vortex of fear, apathy, despair, because those are lower realms of consciousness. And I
Mm-hmm.
know a little bit about consciousness. I've studied it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, this can be an individual journey, an individual strategy of just experiencing. We started with joy. When you
Mm-hmm.
experience joy, what does your heart feel? You know what it feels like. I don't care if you're playing music, you're playing with your daughter, you're learning, teaching her to ride a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's those moments like, wait a minute, I'm paying attention to this heart flutter, right? That is a sign that, wait a minute, this is possible. And this is a human reality. And can we find more moments in which joy can be
Mm-hmm.
physically experienced? And then we keep going to that. You keep, right? And you keep trying to stay in that zone. It's like a bandwidth of joy of consciousness that is hard to stay in, especially when the world is in this pandemic fear.
Yeah, it's taking it. It takes a lot of courage to stay there and to persist,
It does.
to take
Yeah.
up the uncertainty that comes with it, because you exclude yourself from a certain system that might help you survive, because you choose to not survive but to thrive and to live. That's I think what it means to follow your joy. um, but just a couple of minutes ago, you spoke about you have a bit of a buffer, a reserve, for about a year. So you've taken care of yourself really well. And I'm just wondering, um, doesn't that
That sounds very self-centered, right? Oh,
no,
we're
not
okay.
at all.
We're okay. But it could be viewed that way. Oh, my wife always tells me, it's like, don't talk about our situation. And I said, why? But the truth is, I want every one of my neighbors to have the same experience. And I know it's possible. I always said, imagine a world without employees. What do you mean? She's like, no, we're each independent. You're a coach of people. I'm a independent business person. We're all independent in the sense of, sometimes we need social organizations called workplaces. But I want all my neighbors to experience the joy I've been living with for 15 years. I feel like I left the Matrix a long time ago. But
Hmm.
then I wake up and I was like, I still have a responsibility to my neighbor, because they're still living in the slave system. And the slave system is completely unnecessary. It is a frustration. I wake up every day like, why is this persisting? You know, we're building on people's fears, actually creating conditions of fear. And it's completely stupid. It's just stupid. And it's unnecessary, and we can create a better system. Again, which nobody ever wakes up again feeling anxious about money. It's a waste of human energy. And that's what drives. We can do something new, and I know it. And the question is, how do we? Basically, I think we have to experience literally. This is what Steph Coopers is doing. He plays a game, and he goes across in the hall and he plays a money game, and he has people experience what it's like to actually share in abundance.
Mm-hmm.
So just by literally creating tokens, and people are amazed at what they experience, what they feel. They don't feel like they have to hoard anymore. There's always enough. Like there's always, it's like playing poker and your chips never run out. And I'm like, can we scale this stuff? Because what you're describing as a stable money system is so compelling. And you're an IT guy, you know that from a systems perspective, we can scale this game that you're playing now. But we first have to experience the possibility, I think.
Well, and aren't we now experiencing a possibility? Are we not now getting a perspective about ourselves as part of a larger whole, and how influential the most logical way of being is just taking care of each other?
Yes, we're hardwired to be compassionate.
Exactly.
We're not, I reject Ayn Rand's, notion that we're just narcissistic, mean-spirited. I mean, I think she had a chip on her shoulder, but she influenced so many important people like Alan Greenspan. And her notion that human beings are not altruistic, she rejected that notion. Like, that's ridiculous. That can't be. If we're created, if we are creatures of love, that cannot be. I mean, she had interesting comments on love too, but when I read Ayn Rand, I'm like, that one person influenced so much thinking in our economic sphere. Milton Friedman, Alan Green, all were devotees of one woman, Ayn Rand, a Russian, immigrant, who was angry because her family lost all the wealth, right, in the revolution. But anyways, so I think we have to follow the trail and find out where does this consciousness arise, right? This kind of mean-spirited, self individual, greed. Where is it? Because it's not congruent with our humanity. Or I think that's the question. That's the kind of point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and it could be a question, but I think that's not the question that we're exploring at this moment. I think that by being in dialogue about redreaming the future, we're already moving beyond that question, and we're already being in consensus with the hopeful side of humanity and the capable side of humanity,
yes,
emotionally intelligent side of humanity. And if we can amplify that, I think we're really doing a good job. Maybe just by the people that are watching this and might feel inspired to stand tall in the way they are being right now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, also my appeal is to the Chinese people, because I've worked with the Chinese, and they remind us they have a 5,000-year civilization grounded on two important kind of spiritualities: Confucianism, which is very pragmatic, which they adopted. The Chinese adopted Xiaokang. Xiaokang is a Confucian word which means moderately well-off Chinese. It means well-being, right? So what? China's adopted a well-being economy already back in 1979, and Taoism, right? So Taoism being about harmony, about yin and yang, about 8 attributes of the person, of the being. These are fundamental. These were the fundamental building blocks of the Qing dynasty, which was Emperor Qianlong's the great emperor. Qing means happiness, actually. And it was the empire that the British came and tried to free trade and ultimately destroyed, right? So my appeal is, don't forget your ancient past and the wisdom that you still carry in Taoism and Confucianism combined. You have this kind of strong spiritual foundation with a pragmatic Confucian kind of way of being. And I think China, in a way, although this virus came out of Wuhan, what's fascinating me as in observing this, I said one day China is going to stop exporting stuff to the West because one day they will have achieved everything they need. In 10, 12, 15 years, look what they've done. Why? Because they have a money system that Abraham Lincoln proposed and was killed for, and they adopted it. And therefore they can pursue this economy of well-being, the Shaokang economy, and outflank the West, which is stuck on debt. So this was going to be so fascinating. And out of us in a region in Wuhan where manufacturing, where all the Western goods, or a great majority, come from now. So again, a pause, an interesting disruption of the supply lines, which we're so dependent on. We know that we were all like 1 month away from personal bankruptcy. A lot of us, right?
Yep.
Or these supply lines from Wuhan. What happens? The drugs don't come. What we're gonna have to reimagine is we're gonna have to reread Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and say, no, Adam Smith talked about regional resilience. You produce what's great in Holland. Maybe most people, maybe people can't eat tulip bulbs, but you can produce great tulips. But, but this is a fascinating notion: is what if this heart attack now shines a light on the importance of regional resilience. I mean, living off of nature's capacity. So to the extent we can live on a 100-kilometer radius of our communities with, say, 80% of our needs met. Okay, we'll still want oranges and whatever, bananas. We can't grow them in Holland, or coffee, but this is kind of what I've been playing out, saying, why are we so compelled by this global trade model? We're just moving stuff around, releasing all kinds of carbon dioxide. It's not making us happier. And what if we stop and like if I created a spreadsheet right now, I could show you that the global trade system is mostly unnecessary. So if I say China, I look at China, it's like, how much land do they have for growing rice and vegetables and stuff? And you got 1.3 billion people. Could they live just on their land footprint? Probably not. But, could Holland? No. But under different lifestyle conditions, Holland could. And so Adam Smith talked about that. He said, we trade in our regional natural advantages. Those natural advantages are nature advantages. They're land advantages, right? That's why you trade.
Yeah.
So again, these stories, we didn't learn it right. Did you ever hear that in economics when you were studying economics?
I just wanted to mention it because what you're saying is you're making an appeal on knowing as a person, as an individual, what you need, and to really know what you need and not overconsume. So we really need to get back to the drawing table, and that's going to be really difficult, of course.
But isn't it fascinating right now? What are we doing? We're checking a grocery list, and like, if we had to just live in this house for 1 month without ever going shopping again, for 30 days, what would we eat?
Exactly.
I got lots of rice. I got potatoes. I got sweet potatoes. I got coffee. Oh, we need more coffee, I think. Right. So today we got to go out but it's fascinating, right? We have to re-examine very granular.
Completely, because in studying economics, I never encountered the word I encountered the word of need as in wanting, and the commercialized in the commercialized sense, and scarcity, of course. And I
Yes.
think that we have created a culture that's rooted in those ideas
Right.
that makes it really very difficult. And maybe, I don't have the truth, but this crisis is so severe that we really need to go back to that drawing board and see, so what do we
Hmm.
really need to live and what is important in our lives? And then we end up indeed finding out that it's not what we have thought that it was. And
Isn't that
that's
beautiful? Wow.
fascinating.
That
I'm
is.
so humbled
I
by
know.
this.
I get
Actually.
goosebumps just thinking. I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
It's like distinguishing in the economic language needs versus wants.
Yes.
Most of us, for a good friend and mentor, Peter Block in Cincinnati, said, this is the end of the age of convenience. It's, we've been living in this realm of wants for so long. The West, we have more than enough stuff. And now we have to, like, what is my basic needs? I need toilet paper. I need potatoes. I need, I want to make soup. I'm making bread, like you're doing stuff that you would have not done, right? Uh, Even
Yeah.
me, even working at home, like I made bread. It's like, so what? Well,
And
it's
also, thinking about macroeconomic aspects of life and how the world works is really it's interesting and it's mentally challenging, but it's also not really personal per se.
no.
So I think that now it is becoming really personal. It's right just in our faces that we are related to what we've created. Uh,
Yeah, and I think that's an answer to, if I was the Bank of England governor right now, and I'm broadcasting, right? It's funny seeing these comedians, talk show hosts, like broadcasting from their homes. Or kids are running behind them, and like, oh, they're real people. They have
yeah,
children. They have pets. Mark Carney, he was from Edmonton, right?
yeah.
And I see the new Bank of England governor. It's like, oh my, like, what a terrible time to become the new governor. But whatever. I say, to imagine that I know Mark Carney. Like, I probably grew up we went to the same high school, right? And I think he's as real as I am. And so to be talking to Mark Carney right now, I was like, what are you doing, Mark? Well, from a microeconomic perspective, we're holed up, we're self-isolated, and okay, so let's scale this. What's actually happening? People are realizing maybe they only need 80% of their income to meet their basic needs.
Mhm.
All right, so we got a 20% reduction in the want piece. Um, okay, what about the analysis I did, and I keep doing, is how much of our annual income is going towards hidden interest charges on
Yeah.
everything. 53 cents on every dollar American households will earn today,
Mm.
well, let's say in December, we'll go to interest charges on the accumulated debt, which is $73 trillion.
Mm.
What? Uh, you mean if I eliminated that, I would go to, you're saying basically the implication is I'm going to go from a 5-day work week to a 2.5-day work week. So, so everyone's rejoicing, oh, the air quality is better because there's less emissions. Well, this is an interesting experience. If I were to argue that GDP and greenhouse gas emissions are directly correlated, and I reduced 50% of the reason you have to work
Yeah.
just by changing the money system and who creates it,
Mm.
I've gone way past coronavirus right
Yeah.
now, instantly. And the question is, so how do we solve this climate crisis? Nobody's talking about the money system. It's not in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not in the IPCC models.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's like we so already we're seeing the impacts of one virus, one
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah.
But this money pandemic is, to me, equally as interesting.
Yeah.
Again, whether we can do anything about this with our little conversation. Hopefully, people are saying, okay. What I know now is people have the time to listen to our conversation, because what else are they doing? They're watching Netflix or, you know, making babies. I think that the population will explode. You'll see in 9 months it's going to blip.
Maybe.
Anyway,
Maybe.
maybe.
Well, anyway, if anything, that I think a dialogue like this is something that is we're able to have this conversation at this moment. I don't think we were able to have this conversation per se like a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. I think
Actually, no, I disagree. I think we could have had it, but no one would be listening. Everyone would be
exactly,
busy.
but
Everyone's
there was
busy.
busy, but also maybe in a different mind state. You're not able to hear what is being said at this moment because, again, here we are, two economists, quite sensible people, speaking about what is essential in change and transformation. And yeah, you've mentioned how the money system can be reorganized in such a way that it also will address the all climate issues. Surely, but we've also spoken about what's underneath that as a driver of that change, of the willingness to make a change in the money system. And that has nothing to do with money itself. It has everything to do with how we go about life and how we value life. And that's, to me, uh, an amazingly valuable thing to be speaking about.
Well,
And
I wanted to reflect on that word value because as economists, I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, I didn't know you were an economist, so I'm like, wow, we're economists talking to economists. Like, how novel is that? You know, and we're not disagreeing, anyways. But think of that word value. You know, in economics, I was like, we kind of laughed. It's like the y-axis always had value expressed as a snake around a stick, the dollar sign, and then we had quantity on the x-axis. And then something hit me, years ago. I was like, what is a dollar? What is this snake around the stick thing? What is that, anyways? Why do we believe that that's an expression of value when the word value in Latin means valorem, means to be worthy or to be strong? That doesn't necessarily equate to monetary value alone, right?
mm-hmm.
So I find that fascinating as an economist. What is value? What is utility? And we talk about utility. Well, what is a util? What is a unit of utility? Did we ever debate that in economics? Not that I remember. Maybe Bentham or, what's his name? John Stuart Mill's talked about utility, but we're just like utility, value, like. So again, another interesting thing to rethink, reimagine.
Well, it has been easy for us, hasn't it, to just create an image of man, Homo economicus, and then just use that as the way to go about our science.
Yeah,
But
and
now,
then
as an economist, I must say, existentially, I've gone through a crisis because I've been trained in a very traditional way, but I've been completely unprepared for what's going on right now, and so I really re-identify myself or reutilize my knowledge and reframe everything I know, which is for me a relief. But I believe for many economists, it's not. But for me, it's a relief because I really like to zoom in because I find it fascinating, absolutely fascinating that human consciousness is a much stronger factor, and to
it's
look at,
amazing.
yeah, to look at human
And
consciousness, to look,
yeah,
it's recreating a new image of man, that is what's the word, that economy should evolve around, the real meaning of being human.
yeah. I mean, the study of consciousness is fascinating. It's very. I don't think many people have heard of David R. Hawkins, who wrote a book called Power versus Force, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a book. I mean, he was a clinical psychiatrist, and so he starts to study consciousness and starts to go into loving kindness and conditional love with some of his patients in New York, and some of his catatonic patients woke up. They came out of their state, and and his patient load exploded. So he escaped. He ran away to Sedona, Arizona, to then study this, what's going on. How is it that if I go into loving kindness, that these people wake up? It's got to be something about my state of whatever, right? And so he then says, he writes a thesis on consciousness and says consciousness is actually an interesting, logarithmic function from the lower depths of, fear and apathy to this higher levels of enlightenment, Buddha, Christ consciousness, right? Which he defined as a scale, right, from 1 to 1,000. But he said it's very difficult to move up the continuum, as we know. Like, it's hard to stay in. Can you stay in unconditional love? Not for very long. But you could sure try to practice that. And so I've been very intrigued as an economist about this whole, because we're numbers people, right? So I was like, wait a minute, maybe could it be possible that, and what he said is, because consciousness is logarithmic, there's a distribution effect here. So someone like Mother Teresa, who was arguably in a very high consciousness spectrum, her whole vocation was just picking up that next person in Calcutta, right? With no questions asked, recognizing that person has dignity and will die. And so I see Jesus in that person, and I pick them up. Right? And I said, wait a minute, that Mother Teresa had an effect, an impact on millions of Calcuttans because she, by her volition, chose that kind of vocation, right? And I said that has to be true then of anyone in any culture in which consciousness is, rather sometimes inequitably distributed. So that's why I said the power of prayer is really important, right? To stay in a contemplative state, or to try to maintain that awareness, conscious awareness, right, of the divine is really important. That has to be our strategy. So I've been playing with that, saying that's the game, isn't it? To try to raise global consciousness. But now, of course, the whole thing is modulated downwards, right? Of course it has. We could feel it. We know it's happening. So how do we create, again, what you're talking about, a platform for hope, hope, joy, or can we as humanity, will we ever grow up? I'm hopeful. People like you, Evo, like some people think we're crazy, but it's like, no, I'm not crazy. I'm just.
I stopped finding that important.
Anyways,
when you speak about creating a money system based on needs, gifts, and time, I think that's worth living and doing, and thus the money system will be created. Because look at us, it's great examples of it, I think.
Yeah, I think, but your point is also well taken. We have to, even in our, let's say in a month's time, this is all over, or 2 months, whatever, it doesn't matter. But right now, if we can spend the time imagining or dreaming a new system, not just dreaming it, but playing it out, like I do it in Excel spreadsheets. I was like, look, I can show you that it's possible to create money without interest. Like I could show you. It's happening in Sweden in a little bank there. And could we create lending circles, right now? Like, who's in crisis? Oh, you need a month of income to get you by. Can I lend you money without expectation? Me and you, right? I'll just transfer you money, knowing that I trust you, that in 6 months' time you'll repay me. I don't want anything. I don't want any interest. I'm not the bank. I'm just giving you because you're in need right now. That's an experience now that we become each other's bankers. And I think we can do that. We can look at existing banks, say, who's ready? Who's the higher conscious banks in this world? Banks are very low conscious entities. I know that. I've measured them. Is Tridios Bank the bank you want to start? Maybe. They're a little higher consciousness. They maybe the Bella Bank in Ohio now I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want? What are you imagining? We're imagining being the bank of love. Like what? What do you mean? The conversation would have never happened 3 months ago. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
having this conversation. Your whole model is based on love. Yeah, is that kind of crazy? No, no, it's perfect timing, right?
Well,
And
hard
I'm like,
is
so
is
again, we
yeah.
need to tell the stories that these things are happening right now, like these practical, right, systems and models.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
get the European pension fund managers and convince them that, wait a minute, stop chasing returns. Your only return is the well-being of Europeans. That's all I care about. That is your bottom line.
Yeah.
Falco Valkenberg, you advise, what does that mean? You know what it means. I'm not an expert in fund management,
Yeah.
but can we orient our pension funds or our investments in terms of a well-being impact? Yeah, we
Yeah.
can. We can
Yeah.
create those criteria right now.
Yeah. But those things seem to be in comparison to what needs to be done. These things might be relatively easy to do, to think of, to be creative in. But what you're speaking about just a couple of minutes ago is trust. And to reinstate trust might be a more difficult thing to do.
Absolutely. You're spot on. It's trust, right? Because you'll say, well, why should I trust my neighbor? No, no, because that's what economics has taught us, right?
Yeah.
Self-isolate. What does economics teach us? Be your own little castle and put up a fence with your neighbors and only, protect yourself against the mean-spirited world because everyone is inherently greedy. It's not true. It's
Mm.
false.
Mm.
And so this is why the indigenous people are teachers, because they talk about all my relations. What does that mean? Everything is relational. Everything is seven generational thinking. I think about my ancestors and my great great grandchildren and the decisions I make today. I think about my relationship with nature because nature is the model of abundance, and I'm dependent on nature and the relationship. That's what they say. All right. So, how do we engender trust? It's absolutely correct because we're conditioned not to trust.
Mm.
And yet we trust a system that creates, as we just said, reveals something so stunning that the banks create 98% of the money, and we trust that there's always enough in the system to pay us our wages. It's remarkable. It's magical that it actually happens, that it continues without interruption, except now it's interrupted. So we've trusted a system that we don't even understand how it works. And now we're called to I'm asking people to trust each other to share in their financial material wealth and expect no return except a smile or maybe a reciprocal thank you 10 years later. I think
Yeah.
that's the challenge we face as human beings. Do we
Yeah.
actually trust?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to take back, to claim maybe even our nature.
Yes. To claim our nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was reflecting on that. It's like love is who we are. That is our nature.
Mm.
Everything else is false.
Mm.
Well, everything else is a distraction from that truth.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note,
It's
I
like the
guess
cherry on top.
yeah. So I think we need to we don't need to, but
We could
time
close
wise,
off this.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Wow.
I want to thank you. Yeah, and we're just gonna say goodbye on video, but we'll speak a little bit more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
thank you so much, Mark, for your insights.
Thank you,
I really
Shinta.
enjoyed our conversation.
It was wonderful talking to an enlightened economist. So, and a young mother.
Yeah, that's sometimes that really.
It's like what?
So thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.